Welcome back to the Football Goons podcast and happy Memorial Day. We hope everyone is relaxing and taking some time to not just enjoy the long weekend and the unofficial kickoff to summer, but also remember those who have passed for our freedom. This week, we're devoting an entire episode, just as we did last year, to breaking down the pending quarterback battles around the league. Everyone loves to talk quarterbacks, and we certainly aren't an exception to that rule. We're going to look ahead at a handful of teams with big decisions to make on who's going to be their signal caller this year. We'll tell you who we think should be the guy, but also who we believe the team is going to decide on and why. Let's jump right into things this week and start out with the Chicago Bears. They made some big waves recently in the draft specifically. On the surface, it almost seems like it's a no-brainer, but there's a lot invested here in both these guys that are going to be battling it out. So, you got $16 million in cash to Mike Glennon and a ton of draft capital in Mitchell Trubisky. So who is it?
Yeah, I think this is one of only two quarterback battles that we're going to talk about tonight where we're guaranteed a starter who's new to the roster. And, the other team, I'm not crazy about it. Here with the Bears, I actually love it for them. I mean, you're talking about a team that had the second leading rusher in the league last year, number 15 defense, which is obviously solid yet unspectacular. But for that kind of team to be the third worst team in the league, you can only point to one thing, and that was the quarterback play. Now, part of that was the lack of consistency. You had three starting quarterbacks due to injury, but the names are uninspiring at best. You had the stale abilities of Jay Cutler, just the same old, doesn't care. You have the deficiencies of Brian Hoyer, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. I have some doozies on him. And then there's Matt Barkley. So not enough has to be said about this guy either. So, I mean, for me, Glennon, I actually really like that as a stopgap guy. He's not that 35-year-old been around forever. This is a guy who actually showed a little bit of promise in his starts in the past. They gave him a good bit of money, as you said, but when you really dive into that contract, what I really like about it, as far as the Bears go with pending how Trubisky looks, this season you got to have him. Obviously, Glennon's on that roster, but going forward, they actually only owe him $4.5 million guaranteed after this year. Of the $31 million he's still owed, only $4.5 million is guaranteed, and only $2 million of it if they trade him after the season. So I really think of all the teams we're going to talk about tonight, the Bears are in the best shape because they've got a guy who's had success in the past. He's got 30 touchdowns, 15 picks career. That's not bad. We've talked about in the past how this guy's really only not the quarterback for the Bucs because they got Jameis Winston. Like, it wasn't his horrible play that got him the boot. So,
yep.
I kind of like their situation with Glennon. If he works out, awesome. You can almost have an Aaron Rodgers situation where Trubisky sits for 3 years. And then when he comes in, he's maybe ready to go because the big knock on him is a lack of experience. So I think they're in pretty good shape where if Glennon works out, awesome, let's ride it. If he doesn't, we really, as much as it's a huge contract, we don't owe him a ton of money going forward, and we can roll with Trubisky. So I kind of like where they're at of all these teams quarterback-wise.
I agree. I would side with letting Glennon start. He's been a decent quarterback that just keeps getting these raw deals. Like you said, he got it in Tampa Bay when they drafted Jameis, which none of us fault them for that. But then he gets signed for a pretty decent contract. Then they're like, we're going to mortgage the future to get Mitch. And then as recent as last season versus the Falcons, he came in cold off the streets, threw 10 for 11 for 75 on a score. He's a decent quarterback, so I say just give him the rock. The Bears aren't winning the Super Bowl this season, so let Glennon throw the ball and let Trubisky come in slowly.
If the media presence and fans weren't a thing, I think this would be a no-brainer to let Trubisky get the development that he needs and let Glennon start. I think Glennon is your better option for this year, and I really think that it should be Glennon. I agree with you guys. My biggest problem is the stat that I told you guys before. Other than Jared Goff, the last quarterback drafted in the top 5 to not start opening day was going back all the way to 2004, Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning. Like, there's such there's so much pressure for these organizations when you draft a quarterback top 5 to get that guy on the field. Like, you You invested the draft capital to get your guy that you wanted, and now the pressure is just building up and building up to make sure that that guy gets on the field as soon as possible. Now, listen, if this guy was drafted in the 3rd round, it wouldn't make a big deal overall. And I think that's absolutely going to come into play. So, we said we were going to start talking about should start, would start, will start. I absolutely think they should start Mike Glennon. I'm very nervous for the franchise that that's not the direction they're going to go.
You kind of hit the nail on the head, though, like with what you said about the pressure. And that's really the biggest thing with a lot of these situations, because if you look at this objectively, like I think it's easy for us to do because we don't have anything invested in it personally. You look at the division that they play in, you look at the landscape overall of the NFL and the NFC, you're right, they are not competing this year, especially with the roster they have. I think that their defense will be a little bit better than anticipated, but offensively, they're probably going to struggle. Mike Glennon has the experience of having already gone through that, and he was fairly efficient doing so. So why would you throw this young kid into the fire right away other than the pressure? You just have to make a decision at this point in the season, basically, to say, look, we know, which is hard for an NFL team, we know that we're not winning this year, and we don't want to ruin what we're trying to build toward in the future. And that's why I think they should start Mike Glennon. I actually think that they will start Mike Glennon. My only real concern is that when the Bears are bad, and they're going to be, that they're not going to be able to resist that temptation to throw the young kid in there to see if it makes any difference.
Yeah, I think upper management has to make a conscious decision right now. Are we going to run this team, or is the media going to run this team? And then they also have to make the decision, when we're bad, it's not Mike Glennon's fault. It's the team around him. So I think they have to make that right now ahead of time.
I'm not so ready to say the Bears are going to be that bad. I mean, they're not going to the playoffs mostly because Green Bay's in the division, but you're not talking about a difficult schedule here. And I rattled off. I mean, the running game's already there. The defense was middle of the pack last year. The reason they were bad was the quarterback position, turning the ball over too much. So, I mean, listen, don't get me twisted here. I think if Glennon has a solid season, they're a 7-9, 8-8 kind of club.
Yeah, I agree with
that. If that's the case, then there should be zero temptation, either internally or externally, to bring in Trubisky. If the guy you've got, I mean, what were they, 3-13 last year, I believe. So if Glennon's playing well enough to get them 4 to 5 more wins, that's incredible growth.
Yeah, I agree and disagree. I agree that I think they're 7-9 or an 8-8 team, but I disagree in that I think the media always thinks, well, we're 8-8 with this guy. What could we be with the new guy?
Right.
So,
yeah. So here's a question I'll throw out to the group too. Just put your GM hat on, because Rock, you hit us with Eli and Rivers being the last two, but this is a very different situation than I would guess without the solid research that any other top 5 team has been in, where they also brought in a high-priced quarterback free agent.
Yeah.
So, what do you think if you're the GM? Where is the pressure on stronger, or what do you think makes you look worse? Either not playing your number 2 pick, who you even traded up from number 3 to get, or benching the guy that you just gave $45 million guaranteed to. Which of those things do you think makes you kind of more of a scapegoat if it doesn't work out?
Here's the problem, because now last year the precedent was set when the Eagles basically had this exact same situation.
Yeah, but they weren't starting Wentz if Teddy Bridgewater's knee doesn't explode.
Yeah, and I think also, you look at how they spent for Chase Daniel. Now, no one expected that they were going to play Chase Daniel, but for 2 straight years, you spent highly at the quarterback position, then invested the number 2 overall pick, and I think they saw pretty early on, okay, this kid could be special. So I don't know. I mean, it's going to be troublesome because the precedent is there for it to happen, but I think that's more of an exception than a rule. I don't know if that makes sense.
Here's my biggest problem. Miles, you said that the running game is there, and it is. Nobody's debating that. The lack of weapons at the wide receiver position scares the life out of me for a young quarterback with no no
Victor
experience. Victor Cruz. Yeah, and Ruben Randall too. No, seriously though, like it scares me for Trubisky, who's already got no experience. And I mean, maybe with that in mind, knowing that the weapons are not really there, that the Bears can make the executive decision to say, listen, this is a learning year for Trubisky. You know what I mean? Kind of like what I think the Rams wanted to do with Goff last year, but then you get to the point where you're 0 whatever, and you're like, all right, well, what harm is it going to do to start this kid now? You know what I mean? Our season is already over, and maybe that's what they do. They decide Mike Glennon's our guy unless we get to the point where we're 0-7. 0-8, but I think it would look worse with at least this situation. It would look worse to start Trubisky and have it go south than it would to, develop Trubisky, start the guy you gave all the money to. If it goes south, it goes south, but you can always turn to your future, franchise quarterback at that point.
All right, so just for the sake of clarification here, it sounds like everybody's pretty much saying should start Glennon, will start Glennon.
Yeah.
But we're also not completely out on the idea of Trubisky if it works out.
I am.
I'm out that they shouldn't.
I think barring injury, Trubisky should not field a snap this year.
Me too.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to another situation, another team, the Denver Broncos. Now, here's a team that is a borderline playoff team if you look at the way that this roster is built, especially on the defensive side. But it's really pending the play of the quarterback. And we saw that last year with the inconsistency there. Is it time to maybe, it's kind of weird to say this because they're both young, look to the future with Paxton or continue with the project that they kind of kicked off last year?
We're all excited about this one. Everybody wants to
let's jump in there. And now nobody wants to jump in. Okay, I'll take it. I said a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about this position for the Broncos, I feel like they're very pedestrian and one-sided and one-dimensional with Trevor Siemian at quarterback. He's the safer option here, absolutely. But once C.J. Anderson went down, you saw that Siemian cannot take control of this team and lead them to where they need to be. This is a defense that is still right in its wheelhouse for a Super Bowl contention, and I think they should start Paxton Lynch. You've given him a year's worth of experience. He's going to have an entire offseason now to go through, and I think by the time it comes around for preseason and regular season football, Paxton Lynch will have risen above Trevor Siemian by that point, and it's going to be the obvious no-brainer. If it's not, then I don't think Paxton Lynch is your guy, and you should scrap it altogether. You know what I mean? So by this point, Trevor Siemian is not the quarterback of the future for you, and he's not a guy that is going to win you games. He will not lose you games, but he will not win you games, and that's, some may say that those are equally as bad. So with that being said, I think Paxton Lynch should be the starter. I know we had a very small sample size of him last year, but like I said, we're getting a full year with him now, a full offseason with him now, 50-50 reps, for more than likely going forward. I think Paxton Lynch should be the starter.
Yeah, I think it has to be Paxton. Piggybacking off what you said, this game and this league isn't meant for game managers anymore. It's not a league of game managers. It's meant for guys like Paxton, the gunslinger type guys, are the guys that are making it happen. And, you can argue that Tom Brady's a game manager just because he has a perfect game, but these guys that are being really successful aren't game managers. The guys that are making it to the playoffs, winning Super Bowls, aren't just game managers. He's raw. He may never be an elite quarterback, but find out. And the knock I have on Siemian is that he didn't play over Brock 2 years ago. We saw what Brock brings to the table. I think the proof is in the film over the past 2 years.
Yeah, I guess for me, it depends a little bit on what Trevor Siemian I'm going to get. He's a seventh-round player, so inconsistency is kind of what you expect, but his is like baffling. If you take his best 3 games last year, he threw for 1,014 yards, 8 touchdowns, and no picks, which is great until you consider that means his other 11 starts, he averaged 217 yards and had an even 10-10 touchdowns to picks. So, like, the good Simeon is honestly pretty good. I mean, if you can guarantee me, obviously not those exact numbers, but if you can give me good Simeon, then great. But if he's bad Simeon, he's taken the Broncos from a world champion to borderline irrelevance right now. And especially with how good the rest of that division is, that's a little bit scary. So I agree with you guys. It depends a little bit what I see in July, August. Preseason games even kind of matter here. But I think it should be Lynch. Let's see what we've got. And I think when it comes down to it, they will. It's very hard to keep a first-round pick on the bench for 2 years when the guy in front of him, Phillip Rivers sat because it was Drew Brees. Aaron Rodgers sat because it was Brett Favre. Are we really going to bench Paxton Lynch for 2 years because it's Trevor Siemian? I'm not so sure that works.
I'm not.
Simeon reminds me, and this is going to sound funny to you guys, but Simeon reminds me so much of one of my favorite Jets of all time. Obviously very different draft, pedigree, but he reminds me of Chad Pennington.
Yeah.
He's going to be smart with the football. He doesn't have the strongest arm. He's not going to make poor decisions. He might get you to the playoffs once or twice, but at the same time, if you're down 14-0, that game is over because he cannot throw you back into a game. And Miles, you said his three best games. I'd like to look at that because I guarantee you they were games where they got up early and they could afford to maybe take some chances here or there. They weren't games where they were fighting back and winning. If I had to bet money, because that's just not his game. That's not his strength. And Chad Pennington was a very decent NFL quarterback, which Trevor Siemian could probably be, but we're talking about a different era of football, and we're talking about a guy who won one playoff game his entire career, 2 playoff games in his entire career.
I have to say that Chad Pennington is my least favorite. He's my least favorite Jet of all time because one time going into Monday in fantasy football, my quarterback was on bye. I picked up Chad Pennington. I was down a fraction of a point. First play of the game, sack, fumble, injured, out for the game. I lost.
I thought you were going to say.
We got to stop talking about Chad Pennington.
I thought he was going to say he doesn't like Chad Pennington because Peyton Manning's first playoff game was a 41-0 loss to Chad Pennington and the New York Jets. Just throw that out there.
I don't care for that one either.
Look, here's the bottom line of this for me. I kind of like what they've done as a team. It's not a lot of crazy big moves here, but you bring in Jamal Charles as a low risk, high reward, change of pace kind of player. You've got a developing guy in Devontae Booker. I still don't know what CJ Anderson is, but basically you've got a plethora of running backs there to kind of take some of that load off of whoever's playing quarterback. You brought in Jake Butt, who I believe is going to start at tight end for this team. Virgil Green is not a world beater. He should be able to outplay him. You brought in Garrett Bowles to bolster your tackle position. And then sneakily, you kind of brought in a little bit more of a deep threat in Carlos Henderson at wide receiver to add to what you already had there. So there's some decent weapons there. You need somebody who, as crazy as it sounds, is going to be more willing to open some risks is Paxton Lynch. Trevor Siemian is nice as the whole game manager, quote, game manager player, but even in that kind of player, I want more than a 59% completion percentage guy.
Yeah.
So if you're going to give me that, then I'd rather kind of take a gunslinger who's got a little bit more of a bigger arm, who can make some of those more difficult throws, open things up for me. So to me, I think that they should start Lynch, and I think that they're actually going to start Lynch.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, just real quickly too, just as a courtesy mention, any thought at all to Chad Kelly being able to put some pressure on either of these guys? Most likely not, but got to give him the courtesy mention.
I think he could end up, if he ever gets a shot and he keeps his life together, I think he could be a decent quarterback.
Stranger things have happened, like Trevor Siemian winning the job last year.
Yeah, I agree.
His injury.
And you called that in this podcast last year, so you want to throw out Chad Kelly.
I was just going to say, ironically, this same team we were talking about last year, and I did say I'm not sleeping on Trevor Siemian. I'm not willing to go that far because I think that Lynch is going to be the guy, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's their number 2 quarterback.
I'd move him ahead on the depth chart.
I see. My whole thing is, just from an injury standpoint, I don't know that he's going to be 100% ready for mini camp and then training camp. If he misses any time at all, you're talking about those are valuable snaps that he's going to need. I mean, I think he's better than the 7th round that he was drafted in. I think his character issues are really what dropped him in the draft class. I think he would have been a little bit higher than that, but still probably only like a 4th or a 5th round quarterback, developmental type quarterback. So I think, like you said, stranger things have happened, but I don't think he's going to make any large leaps and bounds here.
All right, let's move on. For the 19th consecutive season, and only because that's when they came back, we are going to talk about the Browns quarterback situation. I mean, not us personally for 19 consecutive, but just in general, people talking about this. That's all that really has to be said about this situation, honestly. Cody Kessler, the Brock Osweiler, Deshaun Kaiser, the rookie. What's going to happen here in Cleveland?
I'm actually shocked looking at the stats that Brock Osweiler has a 77.4 career rating. I can't believe it's that high.
It's
Demarius must have taken like 5 smoke screens 70 yards to the house for him.
Let's look into this, see if it's graded on a curve.
Yeah, it has to be. Anyways, to the Browns, call me a sucker, but I'm a Cody Kessler fan. The more I'm looking into him, I actually really like him. I think he can end up being more than a solid NFL quarterback, especially with a good team around him. And again, call me a sucker, but I think Cleveland's building that. I think they're on the way. We touched on the vast improvement of the offensive line just the other week. So that obviously can make the whole offense run a little bit better. The running game's already pretty good. Add in, they made a great quarterback safety net pick in David Njoku, Corey Coleman to stretch the field. I don't know. I like the Browns' chances to do good things this year. I really do. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, whatever little bit there is to be offered, I'm drinking it. I'm probably going to look back in December and listen back to this podcast and be like, dude, you're dumb. But who knows? I am intrigued how eager they're going to be to see what they have in Deshaun Kaiser. And my big reason between Kessler Kaiser, I mean, you're dumb if you're even considering Brock for this job, unless you're Brock, who obviously thinks he should have it.
Proof's in the tape, buddy.
Yeah, proof's in the tape is right. But the best thing the Browns can do this year, we said the Bears aren't winning the Super Bowl this year. I think we can say the Browns probably are also not winning the Super Bowl this year. The best thing they can do is figure out if Cody Kessler or Deshaun Kaiser is your future.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean Drew Brees, Tom Brady future. I mean, can you win with either of those two guys? Because with the draft capital these guys have built up over the last couple of years, if they can ignore quarterback with all these picks, where they have 2 firsts and 3 seconds, I think, next year again.
Crazy.
And they can just build talent around a guy who's good enough to do it. They could be a really, really a championship caliber kind of contenders sooner than you think. So I don't know who my should and will. I'm not going to be too mad either way. I'm going to say Kessler for both. I won't be shocked if it's Kaiser at all. If it's Brock, everyone needs to be fired immediately. Immediately.
Just in case anybody else goes a different direction, because I know that I'm going with Kessler. I think you and I have been pretty consistent in saying that we kind of like Kessler. And one of the things that pops out right off the page at you is that on a team that was as poor as they were, he completes 66% of his passes, and he had a 92 quarterback rating on that team.
2 picks in 9 games.
Right. And I think we're all willing to say that they're going to be better this year. And Deal, this is a write it down thing for you.
I'm on it.
The Browns will have the best offensive line in football this year.
Wow.
Put them ahead of the Cowboys. Put them ahead of the Raiders. The Browns are going to have the number 1 offensive line in football this year.
I'll write it down.
You can write that down. So I think that goes a long way to really seeing if Cody Kessler is legit. I think that he'll be able to stay healthy. He'll be upright. He won't be getting banged around as much. I really like their running game, ironically enough. So They should start Cody Kessler, and they will start Cody Kessler.
I like Kessler a lot too. I think I like him more. The more I'm reading about him and the more I'm seeing about him, the more I think he's going to be that guy for them this year, at least. I love the 66% completion percentage. The one thing that scares the life out of me is this is a team that was playing from behind in most of their games. So they shouldn't have been afraid to throw the ball. He averages 153 yards a game passing. That's well below league average. Yeah. So what that tells me is that, yes, he's being safe with the ball. Yes, he's not turning it over. Two picks in 9 games. You have to love that. But it's also telling me that he's playing the dink and dunk game. And, it's not going to win you a whole lot of games. So with that being said, I think they should start Cody Kessler. I think they will. But I think if they get off to a rough start, the big arm of DeShone Kizer is going to warrant, some questions being asked on whether or not, maybe Kessler just can't be that big arm quarterback that we want him to be. Can Kizer come in and give us that deep threat ability, that we're lacking at this point? 9 games, 1,380 yards. That's 3 games for Matt Ryan. You know what I mean? So,
yes and no, because, and I know I kind of used the 9 games to my advantage when I was talking about the 2 picks, but the way, we love to twist the stats, but the way Cleveland handled their quarterback situation last year, there was a lot of rotation, and partly due to injuries as well. But when you look at his 9 games, he really only had 4 where he only had 4 where he had more than 20 attempts. Right. So, you're slashing the yards, but the 4 games he had more than 20 attempts, 203, 223, 244, and 336. So still not, 336 is great, but it's not 153. It's not like he was averaging 153 in 9 complete games.
And I understand that, but for you to throw out his career games list, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I wanted to use the stat that helped my argument.
Not his.
Not the one that hurt it.
Not the one that hurt it.
Not
Yeah,
the one that hurt
I get
it.
it.
Right.
All right, fine. But even still, he's averaging less. He's averaging, a fair 250, which is not great, not good, not great, not good, not bad. It's
not bad for the Browns.
That's a 4,000-yard season. There's a little math for you.
Wow, I like it. Yeah, I was torn on this one. Not to cop out, but I think this one should be pure competition. See who will win the job, and show the team that it's not just a management move. Show the team this is a who is the best quarterback move. And at the end of the day, similar to Chicago, I think it should be Kessler. I think it will be Kessler. He played well last season, so see what he has. The Browns aren't just the Browns anymore. They're trending in the right direction. So stick with the guy that had some success last year, and similar, let Kizer just kind of wait there and get some more experience.
Yeah, just worth mentioning too, Kevin Hogan is on the roster. I know that he didn't come up. I don't think anybody's really thinking that, he's going to win this job, but it is worth mentioning. And from my perspective, I think it is worth mentioning that I would start Peppers at quarterback over any of the other 3 guys behind Kessler.
Of course you would. Of course you would. I would start Hogan over to Brock.
Oh, yeah.
Hogan over to Brock.
I'll be honest, before we move on, I am surprised that Brock Osweiler is even still on this team at this point. Does anybody else feel that way, or is
it's just a camp arm? If you let him go, you got to find a guy, fly him in, size him for a helmet. You're going to cut new guy or Brock. So
you have, even without Brock, you have 3 quarterbacks on the roster.
You need more. Everybody has more than 3 in camp.
And realistically, you have to size a guy, because after what I heard Brock say, his head is ginormous.
Yeah, can't just fit him into his helmet.
All right. Well, listen, unfortunately, we've got to get bad before we get good here. So let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers. Probably the worst quarterback situation in the league.
Nope.
Ironically, with one of the better offensive minds to deal with it. We're talking about Brian Hoyer, Matt Barkley, and a courtesy mention of C.J. Beathard. What in the world is going to happen in San Francisco?
I'm going C.J. Beathard. they made the move to get him. There's got to be a reason.
Why
now,
not? Why not?
All kidding aside, I think this is going to be Hoyer's job to lose at this point. He's the only real veteran on the roster. I mean, Matt Barkley's a veteran, I guess, kind of. And if we want to consider Matt Barkley a veteran,
He's
I think
been
we
in the
should.
league.
I think, yeah, exactly. He gives you the best chance to be respectable and not a laughing stock, I guess, is the best way I would word this at the quarterback position. Shanahan's going to want to do some big things, and he's going to be very limited, at least until they find the guy that they're going to be able to go with for the future. I don't know that guy's on this roster. I would venture to say that the guy is not on this roster. So I think this is going to be a really struggling year for the San Francisco 49ers at the quarterback position. But gun to my head, that age before beauty, I'll go Brian Hoyer, I guess. I don't know.
I think it's Hoyer by a lot, unless they're in complete tank mode, which they shouldn't be. Barkley sucks. he's a bad quarterback. I think Hoyer's actually a pretty decent quarterback. Last year with the bad news Bears, he had a stretch of 4 games where he threw for 1,318 yards, 6 scores, and 0 picks. He averaged 329.5 yards over those 4 games. So he has stretches where he looks like a decent quarterback. So put him out there because he's your only option at this point. Like, don't start Matt Barkley. Don't do it.
I just really don't care about this one. Like
with the rest of the world.
Yeah, like Brian Hoyer, he's on his 6th team in the last 7 years, which says a lot about him. Matt Barkley's got a career 4-9 touchdown pick ratio. That says a lot about him. CJ Beathard was the quarterback for Iowa. That says a lot about him. So, like, I don't know. Like, I guess Hoyer, he's like a poor man's Vinny Testaverde, where he's played for like every team. And I mean like a broke man's Vinny Testaverde. like broke.
Like a cheese line Vinny Testaverde.
Yeah, I mean it's really, really a bad Vinny Testaverde. But like honestly, the biggest reason, all that said, that I really don't care about this one is because compared to any of the other teams we're talking about here, there is absolutely zero chance that the quarterback of the future is on this roster. Like none. There's a couple of teams where it's really unlikely, but there's no chance that Hoyer, Barkley, or Beathard is the quarterback in 2018, 2019.
Right.
It's just not happened. I think across the board, the 4 of us think it's going to be Kirk Cousins next year. If you even, say, hey, things are going to somehow work out in Washington this year and he stays, the Niners are going to draft a guy top 5 in 2018 to be their signal caller. So this just doesn't matter.
Probably number 1.
Yeah, I mean it's one or 2 or maybe 3, but I mean, like, I don't know. I think it'd be more fun to just sit here and talk about which team Brian Hoyer is going to play for next year.
Yeah,
make it 7-8.
The Browns again.
Just to kind of wrap this thing up, I think that this thing kind of reeks of Hoyer just because it's a new coach. You want to implement your new system. You need that veteran guy to do it. So, you're just kind of trying to implement a system at this point and see what you got moving forward. So you've got a 1-year plan in place with Hoyer where he just comes in, he's a veteran, he knows the routine, and he gets it done. So, I mean, other than that, good luck in 2018 at the quarterback position, basically.
Right.
All right, I said we were going to get bad before we got good. Well, we're still not getting good. Debatably, we're getting worse, because we're going to talk about the New York Jets. They might have been the worst situation in the league before they signed McCown, only because I think he's only like a frog's hair better than Hoyer. It's not an earth-shaking move by any means, but it's a solid veteran presence at the very least. So you've got McCown, you've got Bryce Petty, you've got the Hawk, Christian Hackenberg. What do we like for the Jets?
The good news here for Rock is, like, we try to be impartial, but it is still fun to talk about your favorite team. And, like, This podcast is going to be yearly, so we always get to talk about the Jets at the quarterback battle podcast. So that'll be fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 2 years in a row.
That's something.
Actually, I think it's funny.
Browns Jets. Write it down.
Browns, Jets, Broncos, and
49ers.
49ers.
And Texans.
And Texans, all 5 of them we talked about last year, too. Figure this out. All right, I'm going to go first here because as a fan and also as a goon.
First and probably last.
Yeah. Okay, so
there's a half-hour time limit.
Here's my thought process here, okay? It should be Christian Hackenberg, okay? And here's why. You know that the future is not Bryce Petty. We've seen that now. And you know that the future is not Josh McCown because he's 113 years old. You have to find out whether or not Christian Hackenberg is the future of your franchise before we go into this very top-heavy, loaded quarterback draft in 2018. You have to answer that question this year. You cannot give him any more time to develop, unfortunately for him, and you have to find out if he is the answer at quarterback. Now, personally, I think they know the answer to that question already. I think this is dragged out long enough, and you know, I don't think he's the guy. I don't have an inside track to the mind of the Jets organization, so I'm just going by what I see. If he was any good, I think he would have been on the field last year. I know we've all debated that internally, externally, everything. You have to find out now. Now is the time to find out. I actually find like the exact opposite situation in this case than I did in Chicago, where I said start the veteran. You have to start the veteran, and then if it goes south, start the rookie and see what he's got. I think now you start the young kid. And if it's going way south and it's very evident that he's not the answer, you bring in McCown to salvage a season and not be a laughingstock. How sad is that?
Bringing in McCown to salvage the season is hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. So, but regardless, you still have to find out whether or not he can hack it. Yeah, I did it. If Hackenberg can hack it and know what you have to do in 2018.
I think you're now qualified to write headlines for the New York Post.
That's right.
That's the best headline they've ever had.
You said something that's really important. Like, I think we know by now because, you know, the way they treated him last year, if he was any good at all, he would have been in an actual Jets jersey.
And
even wear a jersey.
Not sweatpants and a T-shirt.
He wore a hoodie or a rain slicker every week and hung out with Beats by Dre on the sideline. Didn't even pay attention to the game. Wasn't even holding a chart. They didn't even give the guy an earpiece.
Timeout. I'm wearing right now what Christian Hackenberg wore all of last season for the New York Jets. All right?
Exactly. They did not even give the guy an earpiece to listen to the headset and to listen to the game plan being called in. This guy is so far removed from being anything legit. You have got to go full tank mode if you're the Jets. You want that number 1 pick this year to pick your next franchise quarterback. You've just play McCown. I think that they should start McCown so that you can go full tank mode, but I think that they will start Hackenberg for the reasons that you said, to see if they've got anything there. But to me, either way, you're going full tank mode. So whatever.
I'm completely opposite of what you just said. Like, listen, Bryce Petty, probably not the answer. Christian Hackenberg, probably not either, although I'm not going to rehash this again. I totally disagree with what you guys said. I don't think they know what they have. I don't think he should have played last year. I actually think that was a smart call. But, like, you know who definitely isn't the Jets' next quarterback? Ryan Fitzpatrick. You know who else definitely isn't? Josh McCown. Like, they need to quit it with these stopgap, below-average, aging, to put it nicely, veterans. Like, if a guy's older than me and you're going to be bad, he shouldn't be your quarterback. Like, Jets, stop it. It's almost like, you know, we talked about the media in Chicago. I think that in New York is controlling things because people aren't going to just accept this as a 2-14 roster. It just is.
Right.
So why are we letting Josh McCown quarterback it when we know he's not going to be our future? this needs to be Hackenberg from day one. I don't want to hear about a competition. I don't want to hear about splitting reps. Hackenberg should be taking every snap with the first team. I don't even think that Josh McCown should learn Quincy Enunwa's number. Like, don't even know who he is. Can't pick him out of the lineup. Fine. Keep him away from the lineup. The Jets just seem to love starting this old head quarterback. I don't know why. Just find out if the kid has something and you can build around, or if he doesn't, let him flop, and then there's no, well, what if? And then take care of it in the top 5, like we just said with San Francisco. So for me, I'm opposite of South. I think it should be Hackenberg's job. I'm going to be shocked if they don't start Josh McCown week 1. Shocked.
They have to give the Hawk the rock this year.
Dude, it's they had to not give it to Ryan Fitzpatrick last year. They tried for months to not bring him back, and 31 other teams didn't. So they're like, fine. But then they started.
He actually had a decent season the year before, so it's a matter of he did have a decent season.
He had a very good season.
You can't argue against that.
Listen, like all kidding aside, he had the best statistical season of a Jets quarterback ever. So like you can't argue that point that he didn't, because he did. The problem is that he never did that more than once in his entire career. So I mean. Listen, I'm in total agreement with you, Miles. I agree with South that I don't think he should. That I don't think he's going to be very good. Now, listen. Nobody wants Christian Hackenberg to be good better more than I do. Like I wish we could answer that problem. I will disagree with you in this statement. I don't think this is a 2-14 roster outside of the quarterback position.
Because all you do is stare at how good your D line is and drool. There's no other strength on the roster.
The wide receiver position isn't a strength?
Absolutely not.
Oh, please stop it.
Okay.
Okay.
We're not going to turn this into a Jets debate, but
that's fine.
Because you love Robbie Anderson doesn't mean the receivers are good.
I wasn't even going to talk about Robbie Anderson, but Eric Decker is still on the roster. Quincy Enunwa, we all love, very, very productive player. The running back combo of aging Matt Forte and Bilal Powell is better than league average, if that's what you want to call it. You know what I mean? The defensive line is phenomenal. I think a good quarterback, a smart quarterback, doesn't make this a playoff team, but makes us pretty close. 8-8, 9-7 possibilities are there. You know what I mean? But the quarterback play was so terrible last year that, they're one of the worst teams in the NFL. That's how bad the quarterback play was last year.
All right, Deal, you were going to say.
Listen, I don't want to stretch out that argument, but you really scoffed at the Bears wide receiver situation. It's eerily similar, like almost down to the names.
Okay, name one proven wide receiver on the Bears that's not Victor Cruz at 38 years old.
Name one proven wide receiver on the Jets that ever did it without a number 1.
Or who is
Eric Decker.
He's never done it without a number 1.
He did it 2 years ago as a Jet before Brandon Marshall got there. 3 years ago. Sorry.
We got to roll this up a little bit, but just to that point, there has to be at least some level of concern with Decker coming off that injury. They're not even sure at this point he's going to be ready for camp.
I'll wrap mine up by saying they need to give they got to get Hackenberg out of his jogging suit, let the guy play football, and he should be the starter no matter what. Not Josh McCown, not Bryce Petty. It needs to be Hackenberg, and just find out what he has. If he sucks, they're drafting the number 1 quarterback next year. If he's decent, they're probably drafting the number 1 quarterback next year. So just let Christian Hackenberg play.
What about Luke McCown?
Bring him. Which one makes commercials?
What about Cade McNown? All right, let's move on.
They're really 6.5 dozen. I mean, just fill in the blank, and you could probably do the same with any of the 3.
All right. Probably one of the better situations that we're going to talk about is the last one we're going to talk about. That's the Houston Texans. And I know that there are some in this group, namely Deal, who feels like this is a team who could make a legit Super Bowl run. Obviously, depending on the quarterback play. Above average play probably gives them a real shot. I'm not sure that they are good enough to beat New England yet, whatever, but it gives them a shot at the very least. So you're looking at this year either Macho Man Tom Savage or Deshaun Watson. What are we doing for the Texans?
I'll start out since you threw me out there. I do think the Texans are really good, which I hate, but I think Watson right out of the gate. Macho Man Tom Savage is not my guy. He's just not. I know I said with the Browns that it should be a pure competition battle, so this one maybe should be similar. But the difference here is that the Texans are a quarterback away from having a chance to win the Super Bowl. So there's really no better way to give a rookie quarterback confidence than by saying, you're the man here. You're the guy. This is your job. No question. That's the kind of confidence that they should give Watson. It's the message that they should send the team, and that they are behind this guy, that he is the quarterback of the future, and that, hey, listen, this is the guy that we believe we drafted because we believe he can take you to the promised land. So that's the message I think they should send right out of the gate.
I think this is a no-brainer. I mean, listen, we talk about Tom Savage last year. Let's remember that he didn't beat Brock out for the job. Brock was just so bad that they had to do something else. You know what I mean? So this is not a guy who we say, oh yeah, well he beat out Brock Osweiler for that job as bad as Brock was. No, Brock was the guy all year long because of the contract, and then they said, listen, this is just awful. This is the worst we've ever seen. It's going to be no-brainer. Will start Deshaun Watson. He's more athletic. He's probably from no NFL experience right now. He's got a better football head on his shoulders than Tom Savage does, and let's not forget, one of the biggest things that Miles knocked Brock about all last year was forgetting that DeAndre Hopkins was even playing football for the Houston Texans and on the field. If nothing else, the fact that they both played at Clemson, Deshaun Watson's going to remember that DeAndre Hopkins is on the field.
Right.
So, I mean, that's gonna be huge to see how he develops with the wide receiving core that's there. But honestly, I don't think I'm not saying they're the best team in the NFL, but I don't think there's a better all-around team that's just missing our quarterback than the Houston Texans. I agree with you, Deal. You know what I mean? You put any kind of competent quarterback in there, they're at least a playoff team, and then from there it could go anywhere. So it will be Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, not a lot to add. They're a championship caliber roster, and it's a perfect draft pick. They just drafted a guy who knows how to lead a championship caliber roster. Yep. Back-to-back years in the national championship game. Won it this year against what is arguably a top 5 all-time college football team over Bama. So the guy who knows how to win and knows how to handle a lot of skill position talent, handle a loaded offensive coach. He's coming in and he's got that in spades in Houston. So, you got a team who went to the Final 8 last year with Brock as their quarterback. There's no reason not to make this Watson. Yep. Unless he just cannot wrap his head around the playbook, which I'm certainly not. I can't comment on that, but
it's an option.
If he can get the playbook, it's got to be him.
Yeah, I'm just gonna agree. I think we'll make this one straight across the board. I think that we are all very high on the Texans as an overall roster, and I think to his advantage, yes, he does have that pedigree of leading championship caliber teams. But I don't think he even has to be the guy that leads the way here. He could kind of be the guy who really just steps up when they need him. This needs to be a team that is just a ball control kind of team. I'll knock Lamar Miller a lot for fantasy purposes, but when it comes to just grinding it out, if you give him the carries, this is a guy who can get the job done for you, between basically the end zone lines. So he's been slow getting in the end zone, whatever. That's irrelevant to this argument. Watson just has to kind of, and I hate this term, be a little bit of a game manager. And that should be more than enough. And then anything else that he gives you is just a bonus. And I do think that he will give you more. But he doesn't have to be the guy.
He can give you a lot more.
Right. So the last thing that we want to do here, and we didn't really advertise this a whole lot, so if we don't really have anything, that's fine. But I do want to just throw this out. Let's kind of go around here and take maybe 30 seconds to a minute tops. If there's a quarterback situation in the league that isn't necessarily a battle at this point, but that you think that there could be a shakeup, and you're willing to kind of throw that out there and let the audience and the listening people know. Let's just go around the room, and if anybody has something, go ahead and throw it out there.
Can I just forfeit mine and give everybody a chance to think for a second here and ask a question? Which of these guys that we went over already do you think has the best chance this season to be fantasy relevant?
Watson.
Yeah.
Watson.
Just based on the team around him.
Yeah, whichever one wins that job, at worst case scenario, hopefully they remember they have Hopkins and Will Fuller and Jalen Strong and Braxton Miller and Lamar Miller running the ball, CJ Fedorowicz. I mean, the weapons alone, I think, make the Texans starter kind of higher than anybody else for me. I'm intrigued by Lynch if he wins it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Do you think it's a close battle? Because, I mean, his weapons are great still.
Yeah.
It's closer than I think, people will realize, because, I think people look at the Broncos and they see a team that's a little bit of a decline, and the Texans are on an incline. But I think that it's a comparable
definitely.
array of weapons. So I think it's a lot closer, actually. But I'm still going to say Watson.
Yeah.
See, the way I look at it is either of those guys win the starting job, or I think both of them will, obviously. But if both of them win the starting job, they're probably still, like, best case scenario, 18 to 20, maybe 17 to 20 range, unless Watson just lights it up and comes out of the gate with those weapons and just destroys it. So, Watson would be the only one that I would think would be at least fantasy relevant this season. And obviously that's going to be once we've seen how it plays out. I don't think he's going to be a guy that you're targeting for draft purposes.
Yeah, maybe multi-quarterback leagues only.
Yeah. Shake-up purposes, I'll throw this one out there. Miles, I know you're going to love this.
I guarantee it's the exact one I have written down.
Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes.
Intrigued, for sure.
It definitely. Like, if Alex Smith struggles at all and Patrick Mahomes can pick up this playbook quick enough, Andy Reid loves that athletic quarterback deal. You've run over that 1,000 times. I mean, you traded up 12 spots to get the guy. If it's starting to struggle at all, we're going to see Patrick Mahomes this season.
I'm always intrigued the same way I'm in Houston now. As much as I bang on Alex Smith for doing Alex Smith things, and I'll never stop. Like, he's better than Tom Savage, but like, I treat it the same as that Houston situation where any team where I feel like you're legitimately a quarterback away from being a Super Bowl contender, like Houston, like Kansas City, if they come out the gate and Mahomes looked great in the preseason and is picking things up in practice, and Kansas City starts out 1-2, and Smith is just like, oh, that's right, it's Alex Smith. He's not that great. He's okay, but he's not good. I don't think Andy is at a position in his career, and honestly, with a roster that's not all that young, I don't think they're in a position to just give the year away and hope Mahomes gets it next year. I think they'll bring him in, and he could steal that job. We'll see.
I'm going to go way out of left field here because that's what I like to do.
The Colts?
Of course you do.
I mean, this isn't like, a gigantic shock, but it is a little bit. I'm going with the Buffalo Bills.
Ooh, I wanted to talk about that too.
I am going to say that Nathan Peterman is the week 1 starter for the Buffalo Bills. On paper, this is not a bad.
Wow, you didn't even say it's going to to week 7.
No. Listen, I'm not going to hedge my bets here. I'm going all in on this.
I'd say.
Tyrod Taylor, nobody really knows who it is, but somebody in that organization did not want him back. When he came back, heads kind of rolled a little bit there. So I don't know if it's from the top down or whatever, but I don't know that Cardale Jones is the guy either. I think Peterman, he's got a big arm. He played in a lot more pro-friendly, pro-style system. You've got a first-year head coach there. They tend to like to establish their own guy. I'm going week 1, Nathan Peterman.
And I think it's important to note because it is such a factor in that stadium. Peterman played at Pittsburgh, very similar weather conditions to Buffalo. So when you start getting into December, November, December, where those winds are coming in Buffalo, and you're dealing with lake effect snow, it's important to have a strong arm guy who can do that. Tyrod is a very strong arm guy, but I agree 100% South. Somebody along the line did not want Tyrod back. He wound up back. And it's like, okay, was that why Rex got fired? Is that why Whaley's not there anymore? There's so many questions that are, that could definitely intrigue you about their quarterback situation.
Yep, it's unsettled for sure.
I got one more. Hold on, I got one more.
Go for it.
Is there any way by like week 4 or 5 that Dallas realized Dak is not good and we get a Cooper Rush sighting? Little Cooper Rush action down in Big D. What do you think?
I might draft him just in case.
Honestly, I joke, but I don't. What % chance would you put that Tony Romo does not announce the whole season at CBS and he starts a game for Dallas at some point?
Oh, listen, I'm gonna
because he call it what you will. He's the backup quarterback for the Cowboys.
Yeah, that's why I'm gonna say
he's just announcing games while he's waiting.
I think this is like a 35-40% chance because I was gonna say when you brought that up. If something happens, if Dak gets injured, if he's not
that's
what they thought,
number 9 is already being pressed and ready to go.
That number's on speed dial.
It's an injury thing at this point, so I'm going to say like 11%. It's 100% an injury thing. I don't think they're going to call Tony Romo if Dak struggles a little bit because I think they're cocky enough to think that they'll just get out of it, get out of the troubling with the running game and whatever the case may be, but. So I think it's just if Dak goes down that Tony Romo's going to get the call. So I'll say 11%.
And Uncle Tony is outside of his trailer right now with the camcorder on the pedestal, throwing a football over them their mountains, staying sharp. So you just know it. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up this week's edition of the podcast. We thank you for listening and watching as always. You can subscribe right here to our YouTube channel or to the podcast on iTunes to make sure that you never miss a single episode. Keep up with us and interact at facebook.com/footballgoons or on the Twitter. We are at footballgoons. We love to hear from you guys and gals, and we need your help to take over the football world from all of the talking heads and recycled hot take artists that are out there nowadays. Catch all of our stuff over at footballgoons.com if you want to win fantasy titles and get the best stuff around. We'll catch you next time.